presumably maybe your slides separately as well. So we have been working closely with colleagues at the CSU and in response to systems colleagues around thinking about procurement and contracting, especially around third sector agencies, as mental health services are expanding in particular across non-traditional NHS providers, and whether there are specific contracting form or procurement form that can support this. So this might be the start of the conversation rather than the answer to all of the questions. And I will leave it to Chris and Mike to take us through the next 60 minutes, 90 minutes.
We have 90 minutes scheduled. We're hoping that that we'll probably wrap it up in about sort of 60-65, unless we talk a lot, which is just a possibility. And then we'll have an opportunity for a question and answer session at that point. As far as the timing is concerned, we are intending to go straight the way through. We think with an hour and a half, we don't need any sort of comfort break or anything in that, so we should be okay. And picking up on what Olivia has said already, that this is probably the start of some of the conversations, because what we'll be talking about today, we don't believe there's a straight off-the-shelf solution for any system looking to deal with this. So really what we'll be talking about today is just opportunities and some of our observations around the procurement and contracting side that we've perhaps experienced when dealing with this sector already. For clarity, I'm Chris Fuller. I'm the Deputy Director of Clinical Procurement for South Central and West CSU. And Mike?
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Pingstone. I work with Chris at South Central at SCW CSU, and I'm an Associate Director of Procurement.
Okay, so as we said, each system will probably have their own approach to this. As far as housekeeping rules for today are concerned, there are fewer attendees than we originally thought, because when the invite went out, it had about 450 people listed on it, so I had a bit of a hot flush at that point. But I'm delighted that we have probably more manageable numbers on that. So as far as protocol is concerned, we're very happy to receive hands up and questions within the comments. I'd probably ask you to refrain from having conversations in the comments, because I think that can distract from what we're trying to get over. But if there's any genuine questions, now we can't guarantee that we'll answer them today, but certainly we will get to them to make sure everything is responded to. During the session today as well, we will be doing a little bit of what we call Menti, which is sort of online responding to some feedback from you for that. So I think what we'll do before we go very much further is ask if you could test this out to make sure that that it works okay, so that when we ask our second question, there's only going to be two. The feedback and the contribution to our conversation could be properly tested. So could those of you who only have one screen but maybe a mobile device, can I ask you to go to www.menti, which is MENTI.com. Okay, and the website there should then prompt you with please add your code number. I've seen some nods, so that must be good. So, and the code number for our arrangement today is 47844786. And if you pop that in, what should come up now is a sort of tester, really. And we originally put this question in when we thought there may be quite a few people, but still with the odd 30 odd, I think it's probably quite important. If you could click on which organisation or which organisation, type of organisation you're representing, that will give us a feel as well that when we target some of the conversations that we have, it will sort of, we'll have a handle on the type of people in the room, because I think there will be some VCSE colleagues. I think there will be some thing. Oh, I can do that. Oh, thanks, Olivia. That's brilliant. Well done. We could do that. So let me now see if that's come up and we've. What do I do? Share my screen. You can see that we're perhaps not the most technically gifted people here. So as you can see now, we're a blend between ICBs, NHS England, NHS trusts, and some colleagues from VCSE organisations, a few from local authorities, Health Education England, and a couple of others. So that's really helpful, and it should give us a quite a broad conversation really when we deal with some of the issues that we're going to be going through. So thank you for that. I'll start sharing my screen now. Oh no, I'm going to unshare that. I'm going to show you my emails erroneously quickly, and it's right, lovely. Can everyone now see creating a procurement to support development of VCSE as a system? Lovely. Okay, so thanks very much for talking with us today. We did publish beforehand the outline of the workshop, and we have said within that it's more of an area to stimulate conversation and to plant some ideas for future conversations, as much as answering all the questions that we're looking to do today. So the flow of what we're looking for, and again, it follows very much a commissioning cycle style flow. It's about creating the strategy and how we want to work with VCSEs within our systems, shaping our approach and preparing to secure the services. We're going to look at understanding the contracting options that we have available to us, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation about how we can make the strategy happen. So Mike and I will flow through these issues as we go through. As far as creating the strategy is concerned, I pulled something from James's planning guidance for this, and I'm not sure if everyone has seen that. Have they, Olivia? Whether or not we need to circulate that as with the slides as well. But it's interesting. It's helpful to start thinking about the environment that we wish to work in, and some of the issues that we do face with working with VCSEs within that. And it's about how we develop relationships, understand the complexity of working with multiple organisations, understanding the sort of contractual issues that we're going to talk about in a bit, and recognising that they're the strengths of the organisations. Now, I think everyone here will be coming from this from a slightly different angle, and so for instance, I think some organisations will be looking to create an area for VCSEs to actually work in partnership at their integrated care board or integrated care partnership level. Others will be looking to really to forge collaborations between our VCSE colleagues, so that they could work together to mutually deliver some of our health needs, particularly around the mental health area. Others may be looking just to identify care navigators who may be able to work with other partners of ensuring that the patients don't slip through the net, and that they're properly signposted to all the services that are available to them, and that they're cared for during those areas. Other organisations may choose to work with our local authority colleagues who have always had really strong links with their VCSE organisations, and in some areas it may simply want robust and compliant contracts that they can call services from, and also ensure that there is reliable reporting for the mental health service data set that's required. So I think for each system, organizations will need to consider what their aspirations are and what their needs are. So I thought before we go into very much more of our arrangements, I thought we could have another Menti moment, if that's the right way to put it. So if I can go back to my slides, if you could return to your Menti. Does it have the question now? What word or phrase best describes your organisation's aspiration or strategy for contracting with VCSEs? Does they have that? Mike, can you nod? Yeah.
Yeah, it has.
So lovely. So please pop those in, and I will start sharing my screen. And then we can see how these pop up. Right, so co-production is coming up quite a few times. There seems to be some concern that some organisations are not aspirational within that. Oh, I'm just going up and down on it. Can everyone see this okay? Not complex or overly time-consuming. We want sustainability. Want to ensure that our VCSE colleagues are part of the solution. Concerned about compliance with PCRs. That's helpful, and we'll be dealing with that today. Really sort of capitalise and embed the skill of VCSE partners. Co-production again. We would like to develop things, but it's not very well developed. Work in partnership between trusty ICBs and VCSEs, aiming to build capacity in the workforce. We want it to be needs-led. Okay, so brilliant. Thank you for that, and we will share all of these as we go through. Let me go back now to. I'm sure there must be a whizzier way of doing this. Oh, so are we back to my slide now, saying Menti moments?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that the message we got is that a lot of organisations perhaps have still got some work to do on the development of their vision and the strategy and aspirations for working VCSEs. There is an awful lot of desire to work together for sustainability, to really harness the benefits that we know are there with our colleagues, and to make sure we're properly joined up within that. If we'll start to move now through through some of our considerations about how to set up within a commissioning body some of our governance and roles and responsibility arrangements. Mike, can I hand over to you? And if you tell me when you want me to turn the pages.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. So the next three slides, thanks, Chris. So the next three slides are are almost reminders, I suppose, reminders around responsibility, reminders around governance, reminders around vision. Because just to again contextualize, me and Chris both from like we said, the procurement and commercial team at SCW, but of course procurement isn't done, you know, for its own sake. Procurement or provider selection is part of, as Chris said at the outset, of a wider commissioning cycle and services for commissioning need. So these 3 slides aren't necessarily things that we in procurement would lead on, but actually are really important to make sure that you've got nailed at the outset, or at least you have given adequate consideration at the outset. And it's also, I guess, worth talking about context here as well. So where we're talking here about contracting and procurement options with the VCSE, this, and you look on this slide and see, oh my goodness, we've got eight groups there, eight groups there. Don't need to consider all of that if we're just doing X contract with Y VCSE organization. But the context here is that we're talking about kind of complex commissioning, contracting, procurement with a group or an alliance or some other collaboration of VCSE organizations. So this slide, roles and responsibilities, is just something to think about in terms of actually it's a really complex landscape. Where we're talking about, for example, if we're talking about community mental health framework in terms of VCSE contracting, actually, yes, of course, you might need the 4th line down there, a project team. Of course, you need a project team, but actually on the other side of the fence, we want to get away from us and them, don't we, in terms of commissioning, in terms of providers, but I will stick with that terminology because it's clear what we're talking about. Actually, you'll need a leadership team in terms of your VCSE partners, your alliance leadership team. There might be a desire for the scope of the alliance for collaboration to expand over time. And that in itself will need some kind of steering group around those additional contracts to consider actually how those will be implemented over time. You will, at the very bottom there, need to actually consider very carefully, and I talk about this in a later slide as well, how and what contracting teams will manage this. If we're talking about a complex arrangement of potentially current bilateral, one-to-one VCSE contracts, moving to an alliance or collaboration or some other arrangement of contracts, that in itself needs contracting teams from, if we're talking about ICB, and we're talking about maybe a trust as well, or we're talking about a community provider, all of those contracting teams to be lined up to understand exactly what that shift looks like. And then moving back to the top, above project team, of course, some kind of program board, but also where we're cross-cutting or where potentially a commissioning process is cross-cutting various work streams within an ICB or an ICS, you need to think about what other boards, sign-offs, and system-wide kind of confirmations or authority will be required. So this slide might look like overkill, and it might look like, well, why are you getting down to this level of detail right now in terms of just this first conversation around complex VCSE commissioning, contracting, and commissioning, procurement, and contracting. But actually making sure that your roles and responsibilities and that you've got your groups lined up across organizations within an ICS is really vital. And I'll just finally talk about the very top line here to really know home is that, of course, you might get all the way up to an ICB board and a trust board or multiple trust boards if we're talking about, again, the movement of contracts from one place to another. If contracts are, for example, currently owned by an ICB and will be moving in a kind of collaborative fashion over to ownership by a trust. But like I say, this is more of a kind of FY slide along with the next two as well. So Chris. This I won't spend a lot of time on at all. It's just almost a pictorial example of the last slide, really, in terms of making sure that you do, when you're getting at the very start of your commissioning process, you do think about and make sure that you have appropriate arrangements for the three boxes here predominantly, which are around the confirmation and enactment of the strategic recommendation, the top left box, actually how it's done, who's going to actually do the do. The bottom left box, the contract management and who is actually involved in that. And the right hand box, which is all of the different committees, steering groups, boards, partnerships, etc., that might have a hand in the strategic direction of what you're looking to do. But I won't talk to this slide any further. Chris. And then this slide is just an example. It's an example from Devon, and I thought it was quite a nice example of local vision. So the ICB, it was trust led actually. It was Devon Partnership Trust here. So the trust started with its vision on the as the left hand side. There was more than this, but this is a simple pictorial that I could fit on a slide. In terms of course, and I'm sure this will be familiar to everyone, developing community assets, reducing isolation and social isolation and loneliness, the gap between tier 3 and 4 IAPT, an MDT approach, new roles like recovery navigators, that kind of thing, and reduction of digital isolation. And through the process, through a 6-month or so process, the right-hand side is again a very simple pictorial of what the VCSE Alliance eventually came up with to deliver the left-hand side. I won't again talk to this, but it's just a very simple description of how it took about 6 months to get from the left-hand side, the DPTs and the ICB's simple vision, to the right-hand side, actually how the 6 VCSE, I think it was, organisations in Devon were going to manage themselves both from a geographical perspective, but also from a service ownership perspective, and also from a back office perspective in terms of delivering those requirements. Chris? So a potential approach to engagement, a complex engagement with the VCSE over a kind of 4-month period. Now we've done this. We've supported a couple of areas, a couple of ICS areas in this kind of thing, and the one of the things that I was absolutely amazed by rather was the sheer number of organizations, the sheer number of VCSE organizations that engaged in processes and wanted to be engaged. So where we do a procurement for, I don't know, patient transport, or for community urology service, or X or Y service, and we run some kind of market engagement, we might see 5 organizations, 10 organizations say they're interested in delivering those services. Where we've run market engagement, and it was around community mental health framework, where we've run market engagement specifically directed to the VCSE around the CMHF, We are talking more like 150 organizations that wish to be engaged with and wish to not necessarily be, at that again, thinking, kind of a alliance or collaboration perspective, not necessarily be at that top table with the ICB or the relevant trust, but just thought they had something to give or something to say, and wanted to be involved. So that is a first really key consideration in terms of market engagement. Is we're talking in terms of a whole different scale than we usually might be with procurement or provider selection. There's a couple of options. I look at the first blue box here, which starts publish pin. There's a couple of options around how to commence an engagement. This one starts with publish pin as a call for competition. I won't go into levels of detail, but that is just a notice that goes out to, well, basically the whole of England and Wales. I'm not sure it includes Scotland. I should know that probably, but the whole of England and Wales, and says, we're thinking about doing this. Now, I'll mention it later on when I talk about PSR, but actually it's really difficult for that to say, and we just want to speak to VCSE organizations. From a procurement law perspective, it's really difficult to say we just want to speak to VCSE organizations, because a pretty fundamental principle of public procurement law is that you cannot discriminate between organizations on the basis of ownership. So what we need to do, and what we need to make sure that we fully understand and that we can properly articulate, is not that we want to simply discuss and subsequently contract with VCSE organizations just for the sake of it, but we need to be really clear at the outset about what is the nature of what we're looking to engage on and subsequently procure and contract, which means that actually VCSE organizations are best placed to deliver those services. So it's about making sure we've stated that, rather than simply, we wish to discuss this with VCSE organizations, and that can be difficult, and it needs careful thinking about. This rest of this slide shows various approaches to that engagement. It starts on the green box with an opening market engagement event, various collaborative engagement events to develop specific service specific elements for specification or specifications, one-to-one sessions with emerging VCSE alliances. I'll come back to that in a second. The completion of collaborative service specs, further engagement events, and a decision how to procure. Going back to the purple box in particular, one-to-one sessions with emerging VCSE alliances. So it may be, if again I'll stick with the example of community mental health framework support delivery. It may be that a system goes out and says, we're looking for an alliance of VCSE organizations to support with CMHF, and actually 5 potential alliances come forward. Actually, this 4-month period is your opportunity is everyone's opportunity to really not weed potential alliances out. It's not about that. It's about making sure that actually any potential alliance or collaboration that comes forward truly understands the ask and truly can support the geographical breadth of what you're looking for, and also the service delivery or management breadth of what you're looking for. So I particularly pick out that purple box for one-to-one sessions with emerging VCSE alliances, because this is over this 4 month period here. You need to have, and obviously we would support lots and lots of one-to-one and honest conversations about what is actually needed at the end of it, in terms of when you decide on either competitive procurement or an assurance process. Chris? I'll just go to the end of the slide. Thanks. Thanks. And this is just some examples of different things that we've done to support market engagement. I'll just talk to, I've already talked to one-to-one meetings. I'll just talk to questionnaires and workshops very quickly. So questionnaires, you may have been party either supplying them if you're a provider, or helping to design them as a commissioner of market engagement questionnaires. And they have 5 questions or something. Is this something that you can do? Do you think you can do it within the price? And 3 other fairly broad, maybe narrative questions. Actually, what we've done, supported on previously, is far more detailed questionnaires in terms of, again, I said that engagement phase is about being really, really clear who, or individually, or what group of potential VCS organizations can deliver your total need. So we've sent out questionnaires as part of these engagements, which are a lot more detailed than the usual kind of market engagement questionnaire, and do say, okay, I think of what does matter, an imaginary ICB with North, East, South, and West. Who will within your alliance, who has the ability to deliver social isolation within the West? Who has the ability to deliver social isolation support within East, South, North? Digital exclusion, gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 IAPT, etc., etc. And to be really clear that actually it's not just do you have the desire to deliver these services, but actually do you have the ability to deliver all of these services. In terms of workshop events, on the previous slide, you saw there was description, or not description, there was noting of events for the design of service descriptions. I saw collaboration co-design on Chris's Menti, in terms of how you, I'm not sure if it was how you are working with a VCSE or how you'd wish to work with a VCSE, but something again that isn't part of a usual market engagement, but I think absolutely does need to be part of this kind of market engagement, is not just the commissioner talking to the VCS, but actually it being absolutely a two-way conversation, and having some of that co-design, co-production as part of the market engagement, be it service descriptions, be it anything else you might wish to co-design. Chris? It's a hand up.
So,
there's a hand up, Claire. Sorry.
Oh. Hi there, I'm Claire Sibley. I'm the procurement partner for children's at Surrey County Council. And actually it's such a hot topic at the moment, so I'm actually really enjoying this session, so thank you. I was just on the last slide that you put on there, some of the things that we're finding quite tricky to consider and make sure, in terms of a fair process. Is this pre-market engagement work with the voluntary community sector, because of the things like the one-to-ones, not so much like questionnaires, etc., but it's making sure that we create that balance of not an unfair advantage if we then go through to the tender stage. So I was just wondering if there was any kind of hints and tips that you could give. I suspect most of it would be about things like, publishing any information on some sort of websites and stuff that we do, to make sure that any information that comes out of these sessions is kind of formally publicised, so that, like I said, going forward into any sort of tender opportunities, that anyone that wasn't part of this prior pre-engagement can, you know, backdate and research stuff that's gone on. But I was just opening that up if you had any other suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for saying you enjoy it, but you're in procurement too, so doesn't count. Well, Claire, I didn't. I said I wasn't going to get too technical, but you may have spotted on that right-hand arrow slide, the process slide, but it started with a pin as a call for competition, a prior information notice as a call for competition, which is a particular type of advert that you can do for healthcare services. You couldn't do a pin as a call for competition if you were buying £1 million worth of tables, but you can for £1 million worth of health services. So doing it as a pin as a call for competition, rather than just a standard engagement notice that you would then subsequently have to do another formal advert for, means that you have everyone that you're going to subsequently run the competition with already in the room. So you have the pin as a call for competition open for, say, 30 days. That's everyone that you both wish to engage with and subsequently run the competition with. There is no further advert. You've already not obliged. You've already done all your duties around advertising. So that's actually a really important point, because if you just if you just did it as a standard pin, which is just a standard market engagement notice, you would legally have to do another advert. And of course, all those people that you'd engaged with would then also have to just reapply again for your advert. Or you don't do another advert and you're at risk of doing everything unlawfully, because you've never technically done an advert, if that makes sense to the other 30 people on the call. So that's a really important point, actually, is that it's a pin as a call for competition. But the other points are, as you sensibly say, Claire, that it is I mentioned, you know, engaging with 150 organizations and running loads of workshops around spec development, running loads of one-to-one meetings with emerging alliances, doing questionnaires, you know, to and from 150. You know, 150 don't fill them out, but you've still got, if you've got 50 or so, actually there's a real administrative burden there. And exactly as you've said, you have to turn that around and send it all out to everyone within the, you know, that's responded to your pin as a call for competition, to make sure that everyone does have an appropriate level of knowledge about what you're doing and what you're telling individual organizations. Cool. I'll just check the chat real quick as well.
Thanks, Mike.
I'll do that later. Okay, so Chris.
So and thanks for picking that up, because obviously presenting, I can't see if anyone's got their hands up. So if you can monitor that, Mike, that's really handy. Once you've determined really what your vision is, what your strategy, and how you think you can realize it, one of the key things that still needs to happen is we need to understand what contractual form, what contractual structure you're going to put in place to ensure that the transactional side of the relationship is properly formed. And this allows you to ensure that you clearly describe what you need, you clearly describe who you're working within, and it describes the responsibility flows and the money flows within the arrangements. And there are various options that we have available to us to deliver that, and probably a few more following the recent Health and Social Care Act, where they sort of starting to mandate provider collaboratives. Now, although they are not mandated for mental health services or for VCSE provider collaboratives, they are quite permissive with regard to how each system chooses to set them up. And so that may balance alongside the sort of contractual options we have. So we're listing a few here. Now, the first one we list here is an alliance contract. And what an alliance contract is where the commissioner of the services has, and we use the term bilateral agreements with individual providers, so one-to-one contracts with providers. But each of those providers has a memorandum of understanding, perhaps, or a technical document that says this is our alliance agreement, and this is how we will all work together. This is how we will manage ourselves, and here's how we will ensure that together we will deliver the visions and the aspirations of the wider specification. It isn't exclusive to be done simply with the bilateral contractual arrangements. It could be part of some of the other contractual forms that I'll show in a second. But it starts to bind organisations in the co-production, in the collaboration of the work that we wish to do. Now, those requirements can simply be binding in honour, and you say that this is how we want to work, and through those collaborative partnerships you can deal with resource management, and you may be able to help stretch workforce and resources across the arrangements. We could ensure that patients don't fall between any stools as far as any contractual arrangements are concerned, and the alliance can meet and ensure that the whole patient pathway is properly resolved. But you can also build in pain share and gain share within the arrangements, that if the collaborative working together co-productively can deliver the vision, the outcomes and the measured benefits that you state within your strategy, then there are opportunities for financial recompense as a consequence of that. And that can be simply top slicing an element of the finances and paying those to the partners in proportion to their responsibilities. It could be a more sophisticated innovation fund, where that if you meet your targets for year one, you have an opportunity to put in a business case for access to additional monies to stretch your performance opportunities for future years. So alliance contracting encourages people to work collaboratively. I think it's probably worth saying that the majority of alliance contracts are more binding in honour or memorandum of understanding than they are ruled by the courts, on the basis that the nature of the contracts and how they stand between the organisations. Another format is a prime contractor model. Now, again, within this arrangement, the commissioner will have one contract with a lead provider or prime provider who will act as an integrator across the system, and that provider will then host subcontracts and ensure that the rules and roles and responsibilities required from the commissioner to the prime provider are backed out proportionately and appropriately to the subcontractors, and the prime provider will deal with the financial flows between subcontractors and ensure that the performance and the reporting to the commissioner is appropriate. There may be additional costs required for the integrator, the prime contractor, to run and manage that, but again, it provides a single point of access to the commissioner with regard to the contract management and delivery of the arrangement. It clearly identifies who will take responsibility, and they can work with peer-to-peer arrangements with like-minded organisations to ensure that the overall service requirement is fulfilled. And then we have lead provider arrangements, where the commissioner retains the contractual relationships between all the parties. So they have the relationship with the lead provider, and also what we would have considered subcontractors under the prime provider model, but they use the lead contractor to allocate funds, and to help manage the performance of all the parties within that. And I suppose when I've said earlier that alliance contracting is not exclusive and can be done on its own, you can have arrangements like a prime provider contract with an alliance contract associated to it, and you can have something similar with the lead provider contract with an alliance contract built into the contractual arrangements between these parties. But it is helpful to undertake this thinking before you undertake a procurement, because the contractual function and the form will one be essential to be described before people enter into any kind of decision if they want to participate. And secondly, it allows you to determine your commercial strategy to ensure that the vehicle that you use provides really strong incentives and legal arrangements to cover what you're trying to achieve within the area, and ensures that everyone gets paid fairly for the work that they do. So some of the considerations that probably worthwhile taking into your decision making is what is the resource and the capability you have to manage the contracts? Do you wish to delegate? Does the commissioner wish to delegate that, as you might do under a provider collaborative arrangement, to a lead provider or a provider collaborative? Do you have the capacity within your own organisation to manage that contract? And would you like to manage one contract or a whole host of contracts? And what are the resource implications from that? How do you want money to work for you? Do you want it to come from a single pot and to be managed against? Oh, is someone on mute? Oh, it's gone very quiet now. Okay. So how do you want money to work for you? Are you going to have just a pot of money and encourage people to work from that? Will there be cost improvement requirements that you may apply to these areas, or will you incentivize performance by release of funds for gain share if you reach certain performance arrangements? If you're looking to move the contract management, as say here, from an ICB to a trust, what does that mean for the Integrated Care Board, and how can they manage that? Does the original commissioner wish to retain some level of responsibility in any future management of the arrangements? And that could be either as a sitting party on an alliance agreement, or it could be through a wider oversight board to ensure that the behaviour, the aspirations and the requirements of working collaboratively are being met. Or again, it could be very arm's length, and the alliance providers may wish to work in isolation to develop the sustainability, the co-production that they need for that. And if they'll actually be letting subcontracts as part of that, what do those subcontracts need to look like? Do you need to back out the contractual terms and conditions that are resident in the core contract equally and proportionately to all of your subcontractors? And how do you ensure the capability and the compliance of all those subcontractors is safe, effective to ensure that all the patients who receive services are safe within that? As we talk about the alliance agreement, it will normally describe how the relationship will work between all of the parties, and it also has mechanisms for new parties to join the agreement and parties to drop off from the agreements as well, because these contractual arrangements need to be living, breathing arrangements. You know, I think we all know that the VCSE market in all of our systems is very fluid, is agile, and it's constantly changing, and we need to ensure that the contractual arrangements that we have in place have the flexibility to be fair to the original people who you've awarded a contract to, but equally to be agile and flexible to accommodate changing needs and changing dynamics within the marketplace. And the contractual arrangements that we proposed can probably do all of that, and we can support on that later. Mike, do you want to talk to this one, or shall I carry on?
I'll say something.
Yes, please.
Get Maya back in. But first of all, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So, Teresa, are you planning to cover VIG data sharing, which often becomes a challenge when wanting to work with VCSEs? Absolutely not. So I know that it's a challenge, but no, that isn't something we'll be covering. But what I can say is that where we've supported on this kind of commissioning, contracting, commissioning, procurement, and contracting elsewhere, IG colleagues have absolutely been in the room and are absolutely essential to make sure that the data sharing does all work. Unfortunately, no, that isn't something that we could go into today, and we haven't got the skill set to talk to that. And Alison, we are exploring this model in Frimley. How do you change contract delegate authority innovation? What do you mean, Alison?
Sorry, I've got a bit of a crick in my throat. Hi, Mike.
Yeah.
It's just we've got a number of small voluntary sector contracts that we need to make a commissioning decision about, and we're signalling that we want to move to a lead commissioner arrangement, and our community provider is happy to take those contracts. It's just about how it's not going out for a re-procurement. It's just the what do we do with the actual contract? And to be honest, a lot of our contract managers are a bit unsure themselves about how to do it. Is it a delegated authority process, or do we novate over to our community providers? I just was seeking some advice, really.
Yeah, it's not actually quite as simple a question as it sounds, isn't it? Is it? Because
No.
you could just say, well, you just novate the contract. And that would be the end of the answer. If it had term left on the contract, obviously, as it sounds like they do. But actually, if we go back to the example of on the previous slide, you don't have to go back to the previous slide though, Chris, where it said actually, is it moving from ICB to trust? This is kind of a similar example where the ICB remains responsible or accountable for commissioning these services, so it immediately becomes a subcontract to the trust that's now responsible for commissioning the services. And if the trust has a subcontract itself, then when the trust wishes to contract with the VCSE organisations, that immediately becomes a subcontract. And that's only one layer of VCSE organisations. If actually you had I talked about a top table earlier, if you had a top table of 5 VCSE Alliance members that all had bilateral subcontracts with the trust, if there was a layer below of VCSE organisations, then technically they'd have subcontracts, and it all starts to get a bit silly. So I think if it was your community provider, Ali, then I'm not sure that's so much of an issue, because you've got your head contract with the community provider, and you'd need to make sure that the overall responsibility for delivering the services in that head contract with the community provider, and then that community provider would then need to subcontract these services with whatever VCSE organisation we're talking about. So I think you can. I think we would be talking about 2 contractual things. We'd be talking about varying in the responsibility for overall delivery of the services to your community provider contract, and then novating the contract that the Frimley ICB currently has with that provider over as a subcontract with your community provider. I think that's what you'd be doing there.
No, thanks for that. And I think that we're just trying to explore what we're piloting it with a couple of small contracts at the moment with the aim that we're going to have a much broader community provider collaborative across a whole range of different services. It's just how we go about it. There's agreement on all sides. It's just the technical bit that we're sort of tying ourselves up in knots a little bit about. But thanks for that.
Yeah, you do get some strange positions, particularly where it's IC beta trust, where you already start with a subcontract, and then you get sub, and it all gets a bit silly.
And I think if I could just chip into that as well, I think, and the reason why it ends up sounding like a spam advert on that is that some organisations are simply not allowed to issue NHS standard contracts, and that's why they need to have this sort of sub spam arrangement.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problems. Okay, so this slide.
Anne's got her hand up as well.
Sorry, we've got two hands up. Sorry, I didn't notice those. So who was first? Anne, you were first.
Hi, thank you. I'm Anne Kenny. I'm from Surrey Wellbeing Partnership, and we're part of the Mindwork Surrey Alliance. So we've been through this process and we've already contractually obliged, but we're always sort of thinking about the contracts and whether it's serving us well in what we're trying to achieve for everybody in Surrey. And I wanted to ask a question really about whether NHS contracts as for an alliance could be more of a joint venture agreement, and whether you had looked into that and what the differences might be.
So I don't think we can give you a detailed answer at all, Anne. But what we can say is that some systems that we've worked with have all looked at whether they can go straight to a joint venture or some kind of special purpose vehicle, some kind of new co. Let's just say that some kind of new organization between the VCS, and so far I've only seen that as an aspiration for the future rather than something that's actually been delivered. I think in the southwest, I think both Somerset and Devon both have that as aspirations for their VCSE alliances, that are currently just on bilateral contracts.
Okay, in Surrey, that's what the Surrey Wellbeing Partnership is. It's a joint venture agreement between VCSE groups, and we're contracting with the NHS, which is our lead provider in an alliance structure. Does that make sense? And so I guess my question is it possible for the NHS to contract as a joint venture with the voluntary sector in a special vehicle or a joint venture agreement, or is that not something we're able to do, or not something we're able to explore to do? Only some of the contractual obligations around, if you become a member of one of those vehicles, then there's very clear and very specific rules regarding kind of governance and behaviours and partnership, etc. And so that's a different contractual framework. And I just wondered, so I don't know if the NHS is allowed to do that, or if that's something that could be explored as part of different ways to procure.
I think it's a complex issue, and well, you know it's a complex issue. I think we probably need to take proper legal advice on the structure. But I think there are difficulties though, that it starts to break down the purchaser provider relationship and the responsibilities around that. Now I know we're trying to blend those issues as far as the new Health and Social Care Act is trying to do for some of that. But I think it would be there would have to be quite clear performance responsibilities within it, that if you're all part of the same delivery vehicle, what challenges that could have. And I think it's probably a complex requirement that probably need legal advice on. Yeah,
okay, I just wanted to ask that question because to me the joint venture agreement is very, very clear on what is an agreeable form of governance and behaviour by member partners. And actually the alliance partnership contract that we have is not as clear cut. So I was just asking the question, but thank you very much for your answer. That's really great. Thanks.
John.
Hi everyone, John McLaughlin. I'm the Chief Executive of Responsive Third Sector Provider of Services across Thames Valley. A couple of observations. Chris, I was so relieved to hear you talk about flexibility in the contracts in terms of from a third sector perspective. It's so good to get a long-term contract. If you're in the alliance, it's wonderful. If you're not in the alliance and you're an emerging third sector small organization, then sometimes that means that your access to funding is cut off for whatever length of time that main contract is. So a plea to people commissioning, keep some flexibility for the smaller organizations who are coming up. And some of those smaller organizations are probably some of the most impactful, working in the most deprived areas, who don't have the resources. And I know, Michael, you talked about the numbers that respond to engagement events. You can almost guarantee that, you know, that's probably 50% of the organizations that actually have the capability to deliver, even on a small scale. And some of the organizations won't necessarily be aligned to the sector that you're commissioning. So, for example, with mental health, some of the most impactful organizations are actually commissioned through education. That's where their funding comes from, but actually the young people they're working with have significant mental health problems. So just the funding comes from a different way. So please do keep flexibility in mind. And also with the alliances, we are part of a lead provider arrangement where the lead provider is the trust. We're also part of an alliance where it's a third sector alliance and we're the lead provider. And we're part of an alliance where it's a mutual sort of partnership. During commission, all these alliances are quite hard work and require a lot of input from the member organizations. So please allow or ask the question when you're commissioning how the alliance is going to be managed, and what resources are you putting into managing those partnerships. That's just a few thoughts from me, being on the receiving end, shall we say.
Yeah, no, thank you. That last point, particularly, John, around resources to manage. We need to remember that if on one side of the table is the ICB and or an acute or mental health trust, and on the other side of it, and on the other side are, you know, the 5 or 6 or 7 or however many VCSE organisations, then it's easy for us in statutory to forget that we have, you know, contracting teams, finance teams, procurement teams, whereas you might have a finance, contracting, and procurement person, and what for us feels like not a huge amount of resource to be expended, is actually a massive amount of resource to be expended by either a very small or even reasonably sized VCS organization. It's something that really has to be never not forgotten at all. So this, thanks John.
Can I just say, Mike, I'm mindful of the time. We probably need to get a toss on.
Yeah, I will do. Okay, so this slide is just, I get to do all these slides where I just say this is just an example. I won't talk much about it. So this slide is a reminder. So remembering that where we're talking about healthcare or clinical services, the NHS standard contract is the mandated form. We need to make sure that that mandated form works for us. So just a couple of examples here in terms of the governance areas. And S5 refers to Schedule 5, Schedule 8, Schedule 9. You may know doesn't actually exist. Schedule 2. So just a couple of areas. So, for example, in Schedule 5, commissioner roles and responsibilities. I've already mentioned actually, you know, who is the commissioner here. It might be ICB, it might be trust, or actually, you might properly consider the VCSE alliance or collaboration themselves are also an operational commissioner of other VCS organizations. Excuse me. And how do you make that differentiation between strategic or statutory commissioner and operational commissioner within the contract, and make sure those roles and responsibilities, including funding, potentially are set out. We've got skipping down a bit, Schedule 9, which, like I said, doesn't actually exist in the NHS standard contract, but is something that you could append as a new schedule. You could append a new alliance collaboration, a new alliance agreement to the contract, or to all contracts. Now, Chris talked about alliance contracts. Chris talked about a prime provider contract. Something you could do is you could append exactly the same alliance agreement, for example, as a new Schedule 9 to all of your contracts, to the contract between the ICB and the trust, if that's the case, between the trust and all of your lead provider, your lead VCSE provider, and between the contracts between the lead VCSE provider and all other alliance members. That's something that you can do. You just add a schedule to the contract. And Schedule 2, again, things that Chris has mentioned around being really clear, your arrangements for existing services, being really clear around your exit arrangements. How does an alliance member leave the alliance, how does an alliance member come in? And what happens at the end of the contract? Your alliance might have its own personality, its own branding, its own other things that actually you want to survive the end of the contract, even if the particular alliance you may not. So how do you deal with those important things that you want to make sure you don't lose at the end of the contract? Chris. Okay, some real procurement now. So this is the exciting bit. Just so we don't forget, but we do work. We do. I'll see if there's something in the chat. Is there a question? No. Okay. So we are within a regulatory framework around there is public procurement law that we have to abide by. At the moment, that's three key pieces of legislation. It's the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, it's Section 75 of Health and Social Care Act, and it's the Procurement, Patient Choice and Competition Regulations. But broadly, it's for public contracts regulations that make sure that for anything over, well, in terms of healthcare services, which broadly these I assume would be, anything over £663,000 whole life, there's a presumption that a competition is run. Now, I already mentioned earlier in response to, I'm terribly sorry, Stacey, I think it was. But I'm terrible with names. Oh, Claire, I see your initials there, Claire. In response to Claire, that actually doing a pinnacle call for competition, we'd abided by our procurement law obligations to do an advert. But the exciting thing that's coming around the corner at some point, probably next year, but that's still to be determined, is a transition to the provider selection regime. So I mentioned buying £1 million worth of tables earlier. If after the provider selection regime comes in, you're buying £1 million worth of tables, you still have to do a competition because you're still under exactly the same procurement rules you would be before. The provider selection regime that's going to be coming in at some point next year is just about the procurement of healthcare services. Or the provider selection, rather, of healthcare services. Chris, do you want to flick on?
Yep.
And the exciting implications of this are that actually it will give commissioners, whoever commissions these services, a greater degree of flexibility to procure or to select your providers in the right manner for your systems. So you'll see there's going to be, I won't go into detail in this because but you don't need it, and you probably also don't want it. But there's still going to be the opportunity, if you should wish to run procurements, the bottom one there, decision circumstance 3. But unlike now, to a degree, there will also be great opportunity for you to either continue with existing arrangements, which would be decision circumstances 1A, B, and C. Some of those will be very obvious. You know, for example, I think one of the examples of decision circumstance 1A, where you can continue with an existing service, is things like 999, where there simply isn't another provider of 999 services. Therefore, you can carry on. But others are around where a range of accredited alternative providers exist. So where choice exists, or where the incumbent, where your existing provider is doing a good job in relation to some key decision-making criteria, and the contract isn't changing considerably. So there may be scope within that decision circumstance 1C at some points where you think actually our current provider is doing an objectively good job, and we therefore want to continue with them. But more likely, with these kind of services, we're not talking about the status quo. We're not talking about simply the continuation of existing services. Therefore, it may be that at some point next year, you'll have greater flexibility through using decision circumstance 2 of the new provider selection regime. Decision circumstance 2 being identifying the most suitable provider, or providers, of course, for new or substantially changed arrangements. And that's probably that's for one that you that commissioners might be able to explore in these kinds of circumstances. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just say, we think Bob Smith Limited is the most suitable provider, therefore we're going to award the Bob Smith Limited. You still have to go through an objective process to ascertain that, and you will have to, for example, consider at least 5 key criteria around quality and innovation, value, integration, collaboration and sustainability, access inequalities, disparities and choice, and social value. But it doesn't mean you have to run a competition. And actually, if we go right back to, I don't actually need you to go right back, Chris, but if we go right back to thinking about the market engagement and where we engage with, maybe up to 150 organizations, we send out questionnaires, we have workshops, we have one-to-one conversations. Actually, that sort of thing feels like it could be quite a good approach to decision circumstance 2. To saying, we're engaging with lots and lots of organizations, we're working out who will be able to offer, or what group will be able to offer the most quality and innovative services, value, integration, collaboration, sustainability, etc., without necessarily having to go through a subsequent procurement process. So anyway, this is what's coming down the pipeline, almost certainly. Of course, nothing is certain until it's happened, but this is certainly direction of travel for the selection of healthcare services. Chris, do you want to add anything to that slide?
No, I think you've explained it pretty well, but I do think it does allow flexibility, and it does also allow flexibility around any qualified provider arrangements as well, where they can be awarded much quicker based on just the competency and capability of providers, which may suit particularly some of the smaller organisations, and being able to picking up on John's issue about flexing, bringing people on board and maybe dropping people off without necessarily going through too much bureaucracy in doing so. So I think there are real opportunities, and we're certainly evolving our processes and our ways of working to ensure that that we're ready for this regime as and when it comes in, but it's still got to go through parliamentary scrutiny, and it would appear at the moment that the government spends most of its time looking at its own navel at the moment, so let's hope it gets pushed through at the timescales they hope it's going to. Mike, I'll skip the next slide
Okey-doke.
and come on to just one
Yeah.
one thing here. Okay.
So yeah, just very quickly, and this is a potential. If you do this shows twin tracks. Basically, the top track is a potential competitive procurement process. The bottom track is a non-competitive assurance process. So if we think back again to the market engagement, if we end the market engagement and we've only got a single, we've got one alliance of VCSE organizations still remaining, then we can and make sure that we've set out at the outset in our pinnacle of competition, we give ourselves this right, but we can set off on an assurance process along the bottom where it's about collaborative assurance, about mutual assurance. It isn't all about the ICB or the trust or whoever demanding hundreds of policies from the VCSE organizations, or that may still happen to some degree. This is about both sides actually being equally and adequately assured that the other is going to support the process. It's about co-led work streams to actually create a finalized alliance structure, service delivery model, and contracting approach. So potentially no question asking at all. Actually, what we can do rather than ask a bunch of narrative questions as you would have in a traditional procurement is say, okay, actually, we're going to split this assurance process up into 3 or 4 areas. We're going to split it up into service delivery, into governance, and into finance. And then actually, we're going to have co-led work streams between statutory and VCSE on each of those work streams, and the product of those work streams isn't that the VCSE organizations deliver how they're going to do service delivery or deliver, a financial template of how they're going to do it. Actually, what those co-led work streams deliver is simply completed contract schedules. Schedule 2A for the service description, Schedule 3F or whatever it is for the financial template, and Schedule 1 to 8 for the other elements. Because even though I have procurement in my job title and I do procurement, I do recognise the inefficiency in procurement where you ask a series of narrative questions of bidders, and then actually you get to an award, and you then have to try and port the output of those narrative questions into a contract. Actually, the bottom track here, running a collaborative process, allows us to skip the asking of questions and simply make the contract, the completed and agreed contract, what is delivered at the end of the process. And the top line is simply describes a standard procurement process. Chris? Okay. And this kind of gives more words to the slide I just said, really. So I don't need to say much. It just says, competitive process on the left. You've got a traditional project group that oversees the process. Moving to a collaborative process on the right, actually we could have a VCSE Alliance transitional board that has shadow arrangements. On the left, a traditional competitive procurement process. On the right, a process based around completing the NHS standard contract. On the left, formal evaluation of tender responses. On the right, actually, it's about mutual assurance checkpoints. And I've left some dates in there by accident. Apologies for that. Chris?
Okay, lovely. And so, and for those, that's the content that we were prepared to share today. I will stop sharing my screen now. That's fine. So, Olivia, anything from your side, or shall we wrap?
Well, I want to say thank you. I hope that people who are still with us found it both practical as well as accessible, because I love procurement, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think your point about the procurement can be collaborative and bring partners to the table is a really key point. I wonder whether anyone has any questions, and in addition to questions, potentially any comments or requests for further development of any of the aspects we've seen or anything else, and then we can work together again and maybe do a follow-up. I saw a hand somewhere and I think it disappeared.
Yeah, we'll send the slides around.
So I suppose from our point of view, we've done a sort of whistle-stop tour across various aspects of developing these relationships. What I wanted to do was a mentee right at the end to say, is there any more information you would like, or any more a further event on to drill down in granularity on any specific area on that. But unfortunately, my mentee wouldn't let me do that. So if people would put anything in the comments, so would you like some further feedback on the engagement process and how that might work, perhaps the contractual processes and how we can make those work, or the procurement and selection processes? So really 3 areas I think are probably would warrant or deserve further scrutiny, and welcome people's thoughts on that.
So what we could do is put them in the chat and ask people to put a thumbs up. So what did you say? Engagement?
Yeah, the engagement, the market engagement, the contracting options, and procurement and selection. And Anne had her hand up.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I'm sure everybody will be interested in slightly different things, so you'll probably have to do all 3 at some point. But I am really interested in the contractual options, and also if there's examples of different alliance type arrangements, and also feedback on how they've been working, how long they're in place, and what people think. And you know, if you were to do a new alliance arrangement, what would you iterate? What would you change? I don't know if we're a bit too early in the alliance models to do that piece, but that might be interesting.
But Anne, perhaps we can link up with you directly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's been brilliant. Thank you.
And Martin's put a comment in. When do we use a grant versus standard contract? That's always been a bit of a tricky one, Martin. How I've always approached it is that if you're asking a provider to deliver some healthcare services for you, then you need to order contract. If you're supporting an organisation to continue doing what they already do, then you'd use a grant. Does that make sense? And there's a subtle distinction between it, but it's always served me well when I've used that before. Lovely. We're nearly bang on time.
Yes. So if no further questions or comments, we'll finish here. We'll have the recording and the slides available. There are your contact details on the last slide. So if anyone wants to contact you to continue the conversation and maybe engage your services, then that's there. And then if we have any requests through our generic inbox or our contacts for any further sessions on either engagement, contracting options, or procurement and selection, or even a mini session on each one of the 3, then we'll carry on and follow up with that. So thank you very much both.
Right.
And thank you to everybody who joined.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.